Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 2 of the Untap Podcast. Today we're going to be talking all about Magic the Gathering and the history of the Planeswalkers. My name is Chris. I go by Tremilla Gaming on most of my social medias, and as always, I'm joined here today by Mark.
Hello there.
And Mike.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Great to have you. So, Magic the Gathering is a game that was introduced in 1993. It was made by a guy named Richard Garfield. And it was meant for two or more people to be able to kind of just sit down and play a game on the go. It was really like there was lots of gaming conventions going on. And so it was meant for those people at these conventions to be able to like sit down and play a friendly game that was portable, something they could have in their bag or pocket or whatever, and just whip out and, hey, let's play a game of Magic. Initially, they didn't want to call the game Magic because it was too generic, and then they settled finally on Magic the Gathering.
I have an insert on this one.
Go for it.
The Gathering was a subtitle for the game, and they were going to change it constantly. It was going to be Magic, and then like the introduction of the new subset was going to be something different. And then they were like, "No, we're just going to leave it with the Gathering."
Oh, that's awesome! I didn't know that.
Yeah, they were going to call the second set Ice Age, and then they were like, "No, we can't do that." So they just left it as the Gathering.
That's sweet. So there are 5 colors of Magic: red, blue, white, green, and black. They all kind of have their own unique spells and abilities, and you play the game through the role of a Planeswalker, somebody that can travel to all the different planes of existence in this world, basically, and harness all the magic from the different realms. You tap lands from those planes to kind of harness the magic power, to cast the spells. That's where we came up sort of with the name Untap, because we're starting all over and getting all of our magic ability back. But that's just in terms of Magic the Gathering. So with that, we can talk about a plane or a planeswalker, and have Mark kind of jump off there.
Yes. Okay, so my topic is going to be the history of Urza. Urza is vastly important to the series as we know it. And you're thinking, okay, why do I care? Well, like, how is he important? He's our entry point into the world of Magic. He is the storyline we follow with the first release. And I may be mistaken on this, but I believe that we followed him from 93 to like 2008. They didn't kill him off till then, so we kept periodically jumping back into his story constantly. And the reason I'm going to talk about Urza is because in April of 2018, they are going to release the new Magic set, the new block set. That is going to be called Dominaria, and Dominaria and Urza are completely tied together throughout history. You can't really talk about one without the other. And Dominaria is the plane that we are introduced to. It is the place where Urza is raised and where most, if not all, of his story happens. So us going back to Dominaria is very exciting for me, because we're gonna look back into a world, I hope thousands of years after the death of Urza, because we follow Urza's life for like 4,000 plus years. And so you can't really, I don't feel that we can go into the new Dominaria set without talking about Urza. So you guys know who Urza is, right? Like,
yeah.
You know a lot about him.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. That's good, because I'm hoping that you guys will be able to find through my speeches, like little points of clarification, where you guys can tell me to clarify something that might be confusing for our listener. So we're gonna go ahead and hop into this. Urza's life can be broken up into three major story points, I would say. Um, Throughout his 4,000 years of life, there's really only three major events that define who he is and why he matters. This first event spans decades, and it's called the Brothers' War. Um, it's our, like I said, it's our introduction into Magic: The Gathering. We're introduced into Dominaria, this plane, this nexus plane. So it's a converging point of other planes. And on Dominaria, we have an ancient civilization called the Thran. They died out 5,000 years ago, and we're introduced to the story of Urza. He is a noble, an aristocrat, if you will. 10 years old when we're introduced to him, and his father sends him and his brother to an archaeological dig in the middle of this desert. And this desert is filled with artifacts from this ancient Thran civilization. Mishra, being Urza's brother, I don't think I mentioned that. Mishra and Urza are incredibly intelligent. They're brilliant beyond any standards, and they start studying all of these artifacts left behind by the Thran, and they're able to basically make them work again. They learn from all these artifacts, and they innovate and they create new things. And one of the first artifacts that Urza is able to recreate is the Ornithopter, which you can find in Magic: The Gathering as an artifact with a 0 attack, 2 defense. You can cast it for 0 mana. It's a very, very good card to throw out there. It's just a blanket defender. But we're introduced to Mishra and Urza, who are very, very competitive with each other. They're always trying to out-brilliant each other. And throughout their archaeological study, they come across this ancient city, which we later find out was the capital of the Thran. And in this ancient city, they go down to the center of it, where it's protected by all these golems that are just, sitting there. They aren't active. There's no power sources in them. The power sources drained out thousands of years ago. And they enter into this little underground chamber, and they find an altar. And on this altar are 2 stones. And these 2 stones are referred to as, one of them is the Might Stone, and the Might Stone has the ability to power up artifacts to make them work. And the Weak Stone has the ability to suck the life out of them, to make them stop working. And these 2 stones are sitting on this altar. And, being intrepid explorers and how, geniuses in their own right, they go up and they take the stones. And this causes an explosion. This explosion powers up a bunch of the golems that were dead. And these golems come to life and kill their tutor, which causes a fight between Mishra and Urza later on that pretty much engulfs the entire world in a war. The entire plane, I guess we would say, not a world, in a war. And as they're starting this fight over their tutor and who was responsible for the death of their tutor, they start coveting each other's stone. Mishra has the Weak Stone and Urza has the Might Stone, and this explodes into a full-on conflict where they walk away from each other, presumably to never see each other again. And Mishra, being the genius he is with the Weak Stone, goes and gets taken by a tribe called the Falaji. They're a warrior tribe of the desert. And he introduces, using his artifacts and his knowledge, he introduces new ways of warfare to these people. And he slowly starts climbing the chain of command in this desert tribe until it reaches the point where they start conquering and unifying the lands around them. And Mishra becomes the guy behind the scenes, not the leader, but the guy behind the leader. At the same time that this is happening, Urza goes to a place called Yosha. There he, uses his brilliance to win the hand of the queen's daughter through a competition where he builds an artifact. The artifact accomplishes a goal, and what he wins is this kingdom's daughter and all her dowry. So he's set up pretty well in this town. He starts becoming an artificer, creating artifacts in this place called Yosha. And he does the same thing Mishra's doing. He slowly climbs the chain of command until he is pretty much in control of this entire kingdom. And then the old fight between him and his brothers starts flaring up again, and through covert operations and overt operations, they go to war. They're constantly trying to take each other's stone. This culminates in decades of fighting that decimates the plains. I mean, strip mining the land for resources, using all the trees, killing off the home environments of the elves and the goblins, and all the creatures of Dominaria. It turns into a full-scale war that is horrifying. It lasts decades and changes the entire fate of Dominaria. And then we get to the final battle, and Urza loses. Mishra wins, basically, and they're confronting each other, and you find out during this confrontation that at some point Mishra was influenced by black mana. This black mana came from Phyrexia, and it's some point over the course of these decades, Mishra became a Phyrexian. He slowly changed out parts of his body for machines and became evil. Urza finds this out, and through guilt, not knowing if he was ever even really fighting his brother, because he was fighting this being, this evil being, he activates an artifact from before the Thran that they find, which, I mean, if you're interested in this story, there are books. Magic the Gathering writes books that follow the storylines of the new block releases, so you can go look that stuff up. But he activates this artifact that creates an explosion, and this explosion is continent spanning. It wipes out the entire continent, kills everybody around them. All of his own allies, all of Mishra's allies, everybody dies. This continent is, if I remember correctly, it's so decimated that people just can't live there anymore. And the only person to survive is Urza, because when he activates this artifact, he's close enough to the weak stone, and he has the might stone. It ignites his spark. He becomes a planeswalker, and he survives this devastation. And that would be the first major block of Urza's life. This is we're finding out how absolutely brilliant he is, and then we find out that everything that had happened, he wasn't even sure if it was really happening between him and his brother. So he swears to find out who the Phyrexians are, what they were doing, and take revenge. And this propels him into the second part of his life. The second part of his life is thousands of years. He runs into and meets a woman known as Zancha while he's walking the plains looking for the Phyrexians. And it turns out that Zancha is a Phyrexian herself. She's what's known as a Phyrexian newt, a creature bred by the Phyrexians, not necessarily to be male or female or to reproduce or anything like that, but to be organic material necessary to create more Phyrexians. So they're the baby Phyrexians. And they have an item in them called the Heartstone. And this is like how Phyrexians control other Phyrexians. Is the Heartstone is like their conscience and their will bound up into a single artifact. And if you destroy this artifact, you destroy the Phyrexian. So this is a very important item. And Urza learns more about the Phyrexians. And he gets this idea in his head that the Phyrexians are a plague that he's going to go and wipe out. Simple as that. Not a big deal. He's an all-powerful planeswalker. He's wrong. He's absolutely wrong. because you have to realize that the grief of actually murdering his brother, um, it actually has driven him slowly insane. So he has this grandiose idea of what he is capable of, and he goes and invades the Phyrexian homeworld, which is a plane that is artificial. It's not a real plane. It's something somebody created at some point. We don't know who. We don't know where it came from. The Phyrexians just inhabit it. They found it thousands of years ago, um, which is why it was so difficult for Urza to find in the first place. I mean, if you follow the books, if you read the story, he spends 3,000 years chasing after these Phyrexians, just trying to find out who they are for thousands of years, and he can't find them. Um, and Zancha is the key to finding them, so he invades Phyrexia by himself in a giant construct of a dragon. Um, and Zancha goes with him, and Zancha goes and finds her Heartstone, and so she can break away from the Phyrexians and be her own independent person. Um, and Urza realizes just how insanely powerful the Phyrexians are. Uh, he goes out looking for a monster, and he finds it. He finds one of the most terrifying monsters in the known planes. Um, so after he is horribly defeated after his invasion, he makes a new plan. He swears that he will stop the Phyrexians from invading Dominaria. And why do they want to invade Dominaria? Because their plane isn't real and it's falling apart. It's an artificial plane and it can't sustain itself. So they're looking for a new home. They're looking to invade Dominaria, take over this Nexus plane, and from there spread across the galaxy. So Urza is like, no, I'm not going to let that happen. I'm going to dedicate my entire life to stopping these people. So he does. He goes back to Dominaria, which at this point is still in an ice age. The destruction of that island royally messed things up. It messed up the atmosphere. It messed everything up. And that's where you find like Snowlands and Magic the Gathering and all that. The Cold Snap block. And he goes back to Dominaria and swears he's going to defend Dominaria from the Phyrexians, but, he's insane. He's consumed by the guilt of his brother and this huge monster ahead of him that looks undefeatable, and he loses his mind a little bit more. So much to the point that he's hallucinating and delusional almost all the time. So Zancha makes a plan to free him of his insanity, and it's kind of a crazy plan. She goes and finds somebody that looks like Mishra. She goes and finds some random person somewhere. His name is Retep. He's important to card games. I mean, you see his name a lot in subtext in old cards. And he looks like Mishra, and she brings him to Urza, and it doesn't cure him, but it kind of, allows him not to be nearly as insane. And they're able to refocus their attention on stopping the Phyrexians. So while he's out trying to find out more about these Phyrexians, they come across a situation where they end up fighting a Phyrexian being called Gix. And Retep and Zancha both die, and Urza kind of wakes up a little bit more from his insanity. Not fully, but a little bit more is he conscious of what's actually happening around him. So then, at this point, Zancha's dead. Urza takes her Heartstone and has this crazy idea that the only way he'll be able to stop the Phyrexians is to know where they come from. So he goes and, he's a genius, absolutely brilliant. He just goes and makes a time machine. Makes a time machine and tries to go back into the past, and he can't. Going back into the past is not possible for humans, I guess, for organic beings. So he creates a golem named Karn. And he creates this golem using the Heartstone of Sancha to give it sentience. So he sends Karn back into the past, and things happen. We learn about the Thran. We learn where the Phyrexians come from, which is its own topic on another day. It's huge. It's a huge topic. There's actually 3 books dedicated to that topic, so feel free to look that up. Um, but Karn comes back. Terrible things happen. The time machine becomes unstable, and another explosion happens, wipes out another continent. Like, this guy can't catch a break. Everything he does turns bad. You know, he's so brilliant, but there's such a fine line between brilliance and insanity. Um, and he walks it back and forth constantly. Well, he wipes out this other place, this other continent, and wakes up a little bit more. And this is actually the introduction of Time Spiral, I think is the name of the block. And it's where they start having, you have Future Sight, where they start looking, you know, all kinds of fun stuff. But look that up if you want. You know, he wakes up a little bit more, and this starts the third part of his life. And in the third part of his life, he realizes that he by himself cannot stop he can't stop the Phyrexians. So he goes about creating all kinds of weapons and all kinds of allies to help gather together to fight the Phyrexians. He creates the artifact ship, the Weatherlight, which is huge. It's a very big deal in the Magic the Gathering world. He starts a bloodline program where he creates the Meta Thran. All kinds of things. He tries to do all kinds of things. And in over the course of the next 1,000 years or so, he slowly builds an army that can fight off the Phyrexians. And you know, you can say he's successful in these attempts, but he's successful in a very Urza way, where he accomplishes what he meant to accomplish, but there are terrible consequences. He creates this great plan to blow up the Phyrexian plane, to wipe out the Phyrexians at their source. And him and a few other people, Gerard Cashman being the captain of the Weatherlight at this point, and a couple other planeswalkers, 8 other planeswalkers, they invade Phyrexia again. They fight Phyrexians. And as he's about to blow up this artificial plane, he can't bring himself to, because he's Urza and he's insane. And he views this artificial plane as his god. It is the greatest achievement that anybody trying to create constructs can ever have. And he can't bring himself to do it. So he turns on his allies. He gives up the whole let's protect Dominaria thing. And he joins the Phyrexians. The Phyrexian leader's name is Yawgmoth. So he swears loyalty to Yawgmoth. And Gerard Cashman is not having any of this. They get into a fight where Urza is supposed to kill Gerard to prove his loyalty. Shenanigans happen. And in the end, Urza gets his head cut off. Gerard takes his head and flees the Phyrexians. So then Gerard comes and finds the Weatherlight, finds Karn, gets, you know, Urza head, because he's Urza, being this planeswalker. His life is not over, even though his head has been cut off. He's still alive. His eyes are the Weak Stone and the Might Stone. They were fused to his body during the original explosion. So they take these Weak Stones and these Might Stones, and they work their magic, and they activate the Weatherlight and create another weapon to try and kill the Phyrexians. But Yawgmoth is having none of this. He chases them into Dominaria. So we're not even in Phyrexia anymore. Chases him into Dominaria. They get into a huge fight, and in the end, they kill Yawgmoth, the leader of the Phyrexians. And that's it. Like, he doesn't actually stop the Phyrexians at all. He doesn't win. He just kills Yawgmoth. He spent thousands of years trying to wipe out these people, and he doesn't do it. But to activate the weapon to kill Yawgmoth, Urza does die. He officially dies. His head, and the Weak Stone and the Mighty Stone, they fuse with Karn. So does Gerard Casper's life and parts of the Weatherlight, and they all fuse together, giving Karn a spark which turns him into a planeswalker. And that's it. That's the end of Urza. So, I mean, as you can see, with the introduction of the new Dominaria set, I mean, Urza has not only wiped, ecologically destroyed Dominaria, he has pushed it into an ice age. He has dictated through the creation of these time bubbles from Time Spiral, from the destruction of his time machine. He basically rewrites the history of Dominaria again and again. So to talk about Dominaria, you have to talk about Urza. And I hope they do it justice in April. I really do. I'm looking forward to see where they're going to further our story. I hope Gix comes back. He would be a cool Phyrexian to run back into, because I don't necessarily see how you can have Dominaria without Phyrexia. So I assume that in some way Phyrexians will be a part of the new set as well. And so our next topic is Planeswalkers. We're going to talk to you about our favorite Planeswalkers, why they're our favorite Planeswalkers. But before that, you may be asking yourself what a Planeswalker is. A Planeswalker is just an insanely powerful being in Magic the Gathering who has the ability to hop between dimensional planes. They can traverse the planes of the multiverse, and every time they hop into a new plane, you're introduced to a new world, new creatures, new everything, basically. I think the only thing that doesn't really change is the mana format. So why are Planeswalkers important? Because when you're playing Magic the Gathering, you are a Planeswalker. That's what you're playing as. And every card you lay down, that's your magic, that's your summon, that's the creature or the spell you are casting as a Planeswalker. But on top of that, you can also play Planeswalkers. These are the Planeswalkers of the Magic the Gathering world. And we all have favorite Planeswalkers, these overpowered creature players that are, you can build entire decks around. They're fantastic. So we're all gonna talk to you about ours. Mine is Garruk. So I'll give you a rundown of why I like him, maybe a little bit about his story. Chris, what's yours?
Mine is Ugin the Spirit Dragon.
And Mike, what about you, sir?
So I had a really tough time with this. There are so many Planeswalkers as opposed to when we started playing the game.
Oh yeah.
Like, we started and there was kind of like a core set of Planeswalkers. Like, we started around the time that core sets were important. There was a pretty narrow group of Planeswalkers, and now there are just a ton. So many great characters have become Planeswalkers. But ultimately, I think my favorite Planeswalker is Liliana, just because she has a really great story. She's not a great person, I don't think.
No.
She has a great story.
Okay, so I'll get started with Garruk. Garruk, I would say, is my favorite Planeswalker for a couple of reasons. One, he's very easy to play in the game. He only costs 4 mana, which for a Planeswalker is pretty small. I think a Johnny has a card that's only 3. But other than that, Planeswalkers are expensive to get out on the field. And when I was starting Magic the Gathering, I didn't understand the concepts of the game. There was so much going on and it confused me. And so Mike here told me to just play green. Just pick it. It's the easiest one to play. And it is. It really is. It's green mana is about summoning creatures. That's pretty much it. Just overpowered creatures. Which fits perfectly with Garruk. Garruk is an overpowered Planeswalker. His story is very closely tied together with Liliana's. For a little bit, Garruk's life has pretty much been dictated by Liliana. He starts out as a mage in a random village. His father was a mage, and his father, the local sheriff, I guess, wanted to conscript Garruk into his posse, make him a mage for him. And his father told him, no, run away, go away as far as you can. So Garruk does. He travels into the wilderness and he becomes Garruk Wildspeaker. Over the next 7 years, he hones his magic by battling beasts, and he befriends them and makes them his subordinates. You have a couple monsters named like Garruk's Horde and stuff like that. And you just follow this 8-foot tall guy who is just all about raw strength. Because that's what green is about. Green is about an overpowered creature. And Garruk believes that that's the pursuit of life, to be the apex predator in a world filled with predators. And he hunts down the biggest, baddest monsters and tries to beat them. And that's Garruk in a nutshell, until he runs into Liliana. Liliana curses him, turns him into, I don't know, she curses him, and he goes insane, which seems to happen with a lot of planeswalkers. Most of them are a little crazy, which I think has to do with a power dynamic. Is Liliana crazy, Mike?
She is not crazy necessarily. She's made a deal with a bunch of demons in return for a lot of extraordinary powers.
Yeah, that sounds crazy to me.
It's definitely corrupted her. Yeah.
Is Ugin crazy?
Not really. Like that's. No? I mean, he has a weird history, but he's not crazy.
Yeah, he's not like Sarkin Vol.
No.
The Mad is literally in his name.
Yeah.
Sarkin Vol, the Mad.
And
Sarkin the Mad.
And that's Sarkin Vol's another planeswalker, and then that Ugin kind of drove crazy. He wasn't trying to do it,
yeah,
but
Ugin definitely pushed him over the edge.
Yeah.
Sarkin Vol is actually my second favorite planeswalker.
So I don't know a lot about Ugin.
No, he's. I don't know a whole lot about him except for what's tied to Sarkin.
Yeah, Ugin essentially, kind of a little brief rundown of what he does. He was not a part of the Eldrazi, but they either invaded his plane or were created in his plane, something to that nature. And his main goal in his life or life force, whatever, is to stop the Eldrazi, but he doesn't want to kill them. He's against killing the Eldrazi. He's actually gotten into a big fight with other planeswalkers because they killed Eldrazi. They killed like Ulamog when Ugin just wanted to imprison them. He was solely against killing other living beings. But where his...
So very, very 20th century America, where we want to imprison you for life instead of kill you.
In a way, yeah. It kind of became his downfall because he made this kind of grandiose prison for Eldrazi, which, you know, Nico Bolas, who's another kind of considered the great planeswalker, wasn't too happy with. Those two actually went into battle. Ugin actually held his own against Nico Bolas, which is insane for any planeswalker solely to hold their own against him.
Yeah, Nicole Bolas is like, he's a pharaoh god. He's huge. He's a big deal.
But what had happened was Nico Bolas mortally wounded Ugin, and that's where the whole Sarkin Vol comes in. Is in order to kind of live, Ugin sent his spirit throughout history until it found a planeswalker it could connect to, and he basically drove Sarkin Vol crazy, which caused him to go back and save Ugin. And it gets weird because there's like time paradoxes in this now, but that's why Ugin's the spirit dragon, and Ugin actually doesn't have a color. He is a colorless planeswalker, which is why...
Ooh, like Karn.
Yeah. Which is why...
So, like...
Go ahead, Mike.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but the time paradox happens when, like, Nicol Bolas kills Ugin, time continues on, and like that plane has all of these different cons, right?
Not
And then
That's not why the paradox happens. Reason why the paradox happens is because Ugin throws his spirit into Sarkhan Vol, so Sarkhan Vol goes back into the past and just shows up.
and then Sarkhan Vol stopped him from dying, right?
Yeah, but 1,000 years in the past, this crazy planeswalker just shows up out of nowhere, saves Ugin, and then just disappears again.
Gotcha.
So it throws
Yeah,
off the
and
entire
that's a paradox
timeline.
in itself. 'Cause
Yeah.
if Ugin doesn't die, then he cannot create
Sarkhan,
Sarkhan.
yeah.
If Sarkhan isn't created, he can't go back to save Ugin. Like that in itself is kind of a problem.
Yeah. But it's an interesting problem in a way. Like,
I actually kind of like the way they deal with that time paradox, where they're like, oh yeah, Sarkhan Bolt just comes from a time that never existed. We're just gonna keep going with this. Like they don't try to like wreck the time space. They're just like, no, that happened, and we're gonna move on.
So what about you, Mike? You said your favorite is Liliana. How does she kind of fit into the world of Planeswalkers?
So, Liliana Vess, who most players just simply call Lily, she was a healer on Dominaria, who experienced just like a bunch of tragedies, and that ignited her Planeswalker spark. She eventually found herself on Innistrad, where she ran into Garruk and cursed him.
Yep.
So, like, sometime after becoming a Planeswalker, she made a deal with some of the multiverse's strongest demons. So, like I said, she could just get more power. She's very power hungry, which is kind of true to black mana. It's just about death and destruction and just having the most power.
Yeah.
So in lots of the artwork, you can kind of see like these ruins on her like skin, and those are actually that's actually the pact that she made with the demons. Like it's the writing of it.
Oh, that's cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah, and so then in Innistrad, she gets the Chain Veil, which also amplifies her powers even more. She's just, like I said, power hungry. But everything she does kind of makes her sanity deteriorate a little more. She gets more power, but then kind of like her charisma just goes down. So
All
now
Planeswalkers are insane.
currently she's like joined up with the Gatewatch as a sort of pseudo ally. She's just tagging along in an effort to defeat the demons that she made the pact with. She's pretty much convinced that like she can kill them off and continue to gain more and more power. Mechanically in game, I think that was the first thing that like drew me to her. Like she just has great cards.
Yeah. Her cards can wreck the field.
And Mike, you touched on it a hair, but the Gatewatch actually connects with Ugin. Those are the planeswalkers that Ugin's pissed off with. Because they banded together, this group of planeswalkers banded together to take down the Eldrazi, which are these colorless beings that got really powerful really quickly.
Yeah, they're like Cthulhuian.
Yeah.
Or H.P. Lovecraftian.
That's what they're based on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Lovecraft's ancient ones.
Yeah, they're creatures from the abyss that are tearing through into our reality.
Which, fair enough. I would want to probably kill them too, but
Yeah, but you like Ugin, who doesn't want
I
to play him.
know,
What's
I
that
know.
about? I feel like what you just said and your actual stance might be different.
I mean, if you saw almighty like Cthulhu beings just show up out of nowhere, your first thought isn't, let's put those guys in the jail. Let's take them out to the county. We'll put
No.
them in the jail. It's not my first thought when I see that shit. So I can
No,
understand the
very
Gatewatch's thought and process there.
Who all is in the Gatewatch? I don't even know if I've heard of them.
The Gatewatch, Mark, it's
It's
basically
Nissa,
the
Chandra.
big ones. Yeah. So
Nissa, Chandra, Gideon,
Liliana and Ajani.
Oh, I think I did know that.
Yeah. So it's the
When you say it with those 5 together, I'm like, yeah, I knew.
yeah, it's the core
It's the
Planeswalkers.
big
Yeah.
ones.
Yeah. Fun converse. So going back to Garruk for a second, that veil curse thing that you were talking about with Liliana, that's what she
Yeah.
uses to curse Garruk.
Yeah.
And it drives him insane. But then Evasion kind of brings him back a little bit. That being said, it completely changes his personality. Like he now believes that the greatest prey in the universe is other planeswalkers. So he's a green black.
Yeah,
hunting
it's
other
interesting because up
planeswalkers.
until that point, he was just a solid green card. Like he was
Yeah.
just a green planeswalker. It was all green mana, and then in the I believe it's in Innistrad. I don't think it's in Avacyn.
No,
Reborn.
it's
in
Innistrad.
Innistrad, he becomes the first two-sided planeswalker card,
Mm-hmm.
which mechanically is also a lot of fun.
I don't like it.
Why?
I don't like playing black.
Oh.
I have
Well,
never
it's
been a
just your
fan of
personal
playing.
preference.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's what my personal preference of Garruk becoming a black mana card is very upsetting. I feel like I won't be able to play with him anymore.
But isn't Apex Predator just a green-black planeswalker card?
Yeah, but Apex Predator is before Garruk Relentless. Garruk Relentless is the most recent. It's where we left off with him. He's black-green.
Okay, gotcha.
And now
We don't know what happened to him. We move on to a new story, and at some point he's gonna pop back up. He's probably either. I mean, as described in the lore, Garruk kicked Liliana's ass. The only, but she had the chain veil thing, and she used it as a last ditch effort to beat him. So I mean, now that he's come to terms with his insanity, he's definitely gonna kick Liliana's butt. I'm just saying. In the future, watch for that.
And
It's
see,
coming.
that's how the card game itself addresses kind of the lore of everybody, is that Planeswalkers will get new titles in a way. So you have Garruk Wildspeaker, Garruk the Relentless. It's to show it's all the same person essentially, but at different stages.
It's to show the progression of them in a new block release.
Mhm.
So you have Garruk Wildspeaker, Primal Hunter, Relentless. There's more, and I'm drawing a blank.
Yeah, and I'm trying to blank on Garruk now too.
What does Ugin have any others?
Ugin's just the one. He's just the spirit dragon.
Just the one.
So he doesn't have his
With
old
Liliana,
form.
you have Liliana Vess.
Which
and
is her
then-
name, right? That's the introduction.
Right.
That's her- Yeah,
Right.
Wildspeaker.
So with some of the earliest planeswalkers to be printed in the card as cards to play, it's just kind of their name. So you have Liliana Vess, then you have Chandra Nalar, Jace Bellerin,
Mhm.
and
Wildspeaker is Garrick's last name.
yeah, and so these early I think that some of these earliest incarnations of their of them as cards are some of the most powerful.
Mhm.
But so Liliana Vess, that was the first Liliana card, and then after that, you have Liliana of the Veil from Innistrad, which is just I think the most expensive planeswalker in terms of value right now. And I remember
very overpowered.
I loved playing during the Innistrad block. Like I went to all kinds of Friday Night Magics and played Standard. And I had 2 Liliana of the Veil cards. And at the time, I think they were going for around $20 or $30, like when it was Standard.
Mm-hmm.
And I traded them and then watched the price shoot up to like ridiculous numbers and just felt stupid.
Yeah.
Like I traded one of them for like a playset of Rootbound Crags and like some Drowned Catacombs or something. And I mean, I still have those lands, but I would rather have Lily back.
Yeah.
And then you have Liliana of the Last Hope, which was in was it Shadows over Innistrad?
I think it was Shadows, yeah.
Yeah. Also a 3-drop, so like those 2 versions of Lily are 3-drops, 1 colorless and 2 black. Very great Planeswalker cards. I missed one. There's Liliana of the Dark Realms, which like just gets you tons of black mana. And most recently you have the version in Amonkhet, which is Liliana Death's Majesty, which I really like the whole story of Liliana going to Amonkhet, because that whole plane is kind of forged around making these ultra powerful mummies.
Mm-hmm.
So like she shows up on this plane with the Gatewatch, and it's just like, holy crap, like it's a planet of zombie people.
Well,
like, it's kind of her place. Yeah,
it's very Egyptian. Very.
It is. It's totally Egyptian themed.
So Garruk, we have Garruk Wildspeaker, Garruk Primal Hunter, Garruk Caller of the Beasts, Garruk the Relentless, and this is when he's hunting. He's called Garruk the Relentless when he's hunting Liliana. And then that's the flip card that he becomes Garruk the Veil Cursed. And then after that, you're left with Garruk Apex Predator, where he believes he should hunt other planeswalkers. He actually has the ability to kill a planeswalker. That's his +1, is to kill another planeswalker.
It's pretty awesome.
That's insane. But to cast him, he's 7 mana. So he goes from 4 mana to 7. So that's insane.
Could be good in a commander deck.
Mm-hmm. That's where Ugin gets real powerful, is in commander.
Chris, do you have an Ugin in the Magic the Gathering game? Like, can you play him?
I do not.
You need to get him.
He fits relatively well into my latest commander build too. It's just I don't physically have one yet, because Ugin's kind of
a little pricey.
Yeah.
How much is he?
He usually, physical card wise, he usually sits around like $35-$40.
Wow.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
That's so much.
He's a pretty pricey one.
I figured
and guys, for our listeners out there, let's not forget that Wizards of the West Coast, the gaming company
Wizards
that owns
of the Coast.
Of the Coast. Sorry, I always add West Coast. I don't know why I do that, but I always
not building motorcycles.
No.
Wizards of the Coast. These guys have mastered how to get these cards out cheap so that tons of people want to play. So for him to be $40 is insane.
Yeah.
I mean, he's also, correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, but in the meta game right now, Tron builds are like at the top.
Yeah.
And he's a main card in the Tron modern deck.
Yeah. Well, you figure something we really haven't touched on is all of these planeswalkers, physical card wise, have an ultimate ability. It's kind of their greatest power ability. And Ugin's, you gain 7 life, you draw 7 cards, and then you put 7 permanent cards from your hand onto the battlefield. So that's kind of broken, because he just bypasses tons of costs with his ultimate, plus he gains you life, plus he fills your hand. Like,
that's over.
So I just pulled up the sample deck for the Tron deck that won Star City Games Modern first place at the beginning of this month.
December?
What's that? Yeah,
December.
So they had this open on December 3rd. So there's 6 planeswalkers in this deck, and they're 4 Karn liberated and 2 Ugins.
Yeah.
Like 6 is a lot of Planeswalkers in any deck. And then you put in 4 Karns and 2 Ugins. It's also got Emrakul and Ulamog.
Yeah.
Like it's just a ridiculously strong deck.
And that's the kind of weird thing about Ugin. Like, lore-wise, he's always about trapping the Eldrazi, but most decks who run Ugin run Eldrazi creatures.
Yep.
Most of them run
They
their...
go hand in hand.
Well, because of his ultimate. His ultimate, for the most part, Eldrazi's are expensive cards to play. They cost a lot of mana because they're kind of circumvent the game.
7 of them on the field.
Yeah, for nothing. Yeah. Alright, guys, so that was a brief introduction into the world of Planeswalkers for Magic the Gathering. We went over our favorite Planeswalkers and a bit of the lore surrounding them. So, with that being said, once again, I am Chris. I go by Tramilla Gaming on the social medias. We were joined here by Mark today. He goes by Bald Decisions on Twitter. Mike goes by Plastic American on Twitter. And you can catch us for